Good evening, everybody. I'm Reverend Susan Smith. I'm the Director of the Office of Clergy and Leadership Resource Development.
And I'm Reverend Marcus Tabb, the Assistant Director of the Office of Clergy Leadership and Resource Development. And we're glad to have you join us for our fifth critical conversation on Project 2025, what's in it and what's at stake for all Americans, but especially African Americans.
Yes, and you know by now, I'm hoping everybody knows by now that it is a massive document, 900 plus pages, and it's designed to give the executive, the office of the president, really, complete power on day one of his or her presidency to completely redo the government as we know it and have it all done in 6 months' time. And I should say that it is a document that is prepared specifically and has been being prepared specifically for Republican administration since 1981. So we at the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference believe that it's really important that everybody know as much about what's at stake as possible before you head to the polls in 50 days, just 50 days. I saw where someone posted that what we do as a body of voters on election day will be it. We will not have an opportunity for a makeup exam. So what we do, we have to do on that day, or if you're in a place where you can vote early, you have to do it. And we're telling people to vote up a straight up and down ballot. We're not telling you how to vote, but we're just saying to vote up and down ballot so that, you know, if someone gets in office, they can have the support in the Congress that they will need in order to carry out policies. So tonight we're talking about what happens to us as Americans if the Department of Health and Human Services is eliminated, as is desired. It's going to be pretty brutal. It's going to be pretty brutal for everybody, but especially for Black people. And let me share with you, we were going to have Reverend Amber Lowe with us this evening. She's sick. So Amber, if you're watching, a shout out to you, and I hope that you're feeling better. And also Reverend Brian Gibbs, who's at the hospital with one of his children. So he may or may not get here. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to introduce him along with our other guest. And if you get in, Brian, everybody will already know who you are. So our guest this evening, the first one is the Honorable Wendell Griffen. Wendell, I call him the Reverend Dr. Honorable Wendell Griffen because he's a former judge, but he's the pastor of New Millennium Church of Little Rock, Arkansas. He's the CEO of Griffen Strategic Consulting, PLLC. He is a retired Arkansas jurist with a quarter-century of experience as a state court appellate and trial judge, and he's co-chair of the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference. He's also the author of the book, The Fierce Urgency of Prophetic Hope, and a frequent commentator about faith, public policy, law, and social justice. And our other guest, if he gets here, is the Brian C. Ellis-Gibbs. He is the pastor of Queens Baptist Church in Queens Village, New York, and has been in professional ministry for over 30 years. Reverend Dr. Ellis-Gibbs received his Bachelor of Arts in History from Morehouse, Master of Divinity degree from Pittsburgh Theological Seminary, and his Doctor of Ministry degree from New York Theological Seminary. His doctoral dissertation is, Does the Church Want to be Made Well? Healing Congregational Trauma. He is an ordained minister within the American Baptist Churches USA, and he is also an adjunct professor for the Certificate of Leadership and Ministry program for New York Theological Seminary. So Reverend Gibbs, if you come in, they will know who you are. But this evening we're gonna have this conversation and have Reverend Honorable Judge Griffen talk to us first. There's a lot at stake. This Project 2025 is a I heard someone say, Reverend Dr. Volt say that they want to get rid of multiculturalism and they want to get rid of it in any shape, way, or form that they can. The Associated Press said that women of color advocating for abortion access pointed out that restricting access to mifepristone would worsen racial health disparities. And they argue that individuals of color and pregnant people from marginalized communities are more likely to face systemic barriers that limit their access to abortion and other reproductive health care. As a result, they rely on methods like medication abortion. And as part of their 2025 wish list, conservatives want to overhaul which forms of birth control insurance companies must cover for patients at no cost under the Affordable Care Act. For instance, they have drafted plans to allow insurers to drop coverage of the emergency contraceptive pill, Ella, which some on the right believe is an abortifacient. I'm saying all this because, as for me as a woman, as a woman who has a daughter who may one day have kids, I just, these things that are being put in place, these laws that are being put in place are oppressive and dangerous, and they mark a grave, grave abrogation of the rights of women in all areas, especially in reproductive rights. And it's very scary. I heard a story of a woman this morning who said that she was having a bad pregnancy and she went to a hospital and she waited for 20 hours in a hospital to receive care because the doctors there were too afraid to touch her. They finally touched her. They finally decided that they would work on her and she died. That's what's at stake. So I wondered if you, Judge Griffen, would just begin to talk to us about what is at stake for us, not just with women's reproductive rights, but for all of us on a general level, if the Department of Health and Human Services is eliminated.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, and thank you for moderating these sessions that are so important for people who need to know what Project 2025 is and why it is such a threat to our life as a free people, as a free society. And good evening to all of you. Thank you for viewing these webinars, and please spread the word about the Simon Wood Project Conference, because this is what we do, and this is why we do it. Let me do a little bit of a background. First of all, Dr. Smith said it very well. Since 1981, and think about it now, that's a quarter century. No, that's almost a half century. That's 40 years plus. That's almost going toward a half century. 81 was the first year of the Reagan administration. The Republican Party has had an agenda about narrowing basic civil rights. The term culture wars became of age during that time. And what now is a 900-page document, which the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative foundation funded by some of the biggest companies in the country, that are also funded by some of the wealthiest people in the country, from the Koch brothers to Hobby Lobby to the Family Research Council. These are people who are behind the Heritage Foundation. This thing came out, Project 2025 came out in 2022. But please understand that this thing was written by folks who were part of the Trump administration that was, and I like how Vice President Kamala Harris put it during the debate, fired in the election of 2020. This is what they intended. This is what they hoped to have begun had there been a second Trump administration. But they could not do it because Joe Biden was in power. So in 2022, they came out with what amounts to basically a policy manual and a personnel manual. This is what they plan to put in place. And the vice president candidate, Tim Walz, who's a former coach, said it very well. You don't come up with a playbook if you don't intend to run the plays. A playbook is no good. Let's just put it this way. No director writes a script unless the director intends to have actors, and no director writes a script unless they intend to put on a set of performances. So Project 2025 is a playbook for a right-wing administration designed to do And I will set out three things. Number one, and specifically for this evening, change the whole way that the government works. So the idea of the executive, the president, is not a co-equal, the executive branch is not a co-equal branch of government, but the president is the basic dominant form of government. The political term on this, the legal term on this is called the unitary executive. That's if you want to Google that term, you Google the term unitary executive. Reverend Dr. Brian Ellis-Gibbs has come on. God bless you. We are so glad to see you. And we've been praying for you and for your daughter. We're glad to see you there, brother.
Thank you.
And we pray that she is well.
Yeah, we're still in the ER, waiting to hear from the doctor. She had some tests taken, so we're just awaiting it. It's quite ironic that the subject matter is on Health and Human Services. Here I am in a hospital.
Yes,
Right.
sir.
Right.
Yes, sir. And one of the things that the Project 25 propose to do, is to literally deregulate the way hospitals work so that hospitals will have free reign on not only how they serve, but who they serve and whether they serve. And so the notion that, I mean, it's ironic indeed that all three of the panelists this evening, you, Reverend Love, Woodfolk, and I have family situations that have been health issues. And with regard to Health and Human Services, the issue of reproductive care, and I'm going to drill down on that for a moment, Reverend Dr. Smith, because it is such an important thing for our people and for Black women particularly, is a big factor. You begin reading this section on Department of Health and Human Services, and you realize, I began to ask myself when I read it the first time, why are those so angry at the idea of women having the power to, number one, access, and number two, decide how they will handle their reproductive health choices?
Can I interrupt you? Because this is so important. I do want us to hone in on it, but I also want to kind of respect where Brian is sitting in the hospital waiting room. So I'm not one, can we get you to pipe in, Reverend Gibbs, while you have an opportunity to do that? So if the doctor comes and says you have to go into the room, can we do that? So I know you've done, presented, so can you do what you can do right now?
Great idea.
Sure, thank you. And just kind of attaching what's already been said by Reverend Griffen, that runs through all of Project 2025. Abortion is such a central piece for them in terms of preventing it, either and doing a mandate reporting of it when it takes place. But in the beginning of Project 2025 and in the documentation, it actually gives us a clear reason as to why this is such an issue for them. And that is because of the declining population of people who identify as non-Hispanic white. They have been declining over the course of the last 10, 20, 30 years. And so there is a fear of what, back in the day, Public Enemy would call fear of a Black planet. There's a fear that the country will become majority people of color. And so they're trying to curtail some things. And so, they have 5 goals that they talk about.
Yeah, come on, we're gonna go practice some step around.
Say that again, please.
Go ahead, Brian. I'm sorry.
Okay. And so what it is they have 5 goals that they want to address, but in those 5 goals and reading through it, you really see that they want to preserve the white population. They want to then open up this kind of free market competitive space among medical practitioners, hospitals, creating a marketplace. And they do it under the guise of giving patients more freedom to choose. Well, that might be true, but at the same time, you are also slowly dismantling the structure that was taking place under already. He done at 45, the former president Donald Trump had continued with another term. A lot of what's happening now with Project 2025 would have already been established. And so you see that continuously throughout the document. And then when you look at the different agencies and how they want to dismantle HHS, which has 13 agencies, because they are clearly the chief in charge of all things medical, all things research, all things health for the entire population. They're trying to dismantle, deregulate the FDA. They're trying to dismantle and deregulate CDC authority and power. They're trying to, and in terms of Medicare and Medicaid, which was really established in 1965 under President Johnson, they want to change eligibility requirements for Medicare and Medicaid. And it was really interesting. Medicare, when it originally began, was for the aging. Medicaid was based upon income levels. But they want to undermine both of them. And so they want to change some of the requirements. They want to do is now attach a work requirement for folks. So you just, and he uses the word entitlement in a very derogatory way. That this is folks who are entitled to these things, but they ought to be paying into it. They want to attach private health insurance companies to Medicare and Medicaid, creating that competitive space as well. And so there's really some underlying things that they want to do. They want to defund states who receive monies from Medicaid who are practicing abortion. And so you see that again rising up in that conversation around abortion and reproductive rights. And I looked at, when you look at the percentages of Black women versus white women, or non-Hispanic Black, non-Hispanic white, there is a higher percentage of non-Hispanic Black women receiving abortions. But when you consider that the population of Black people in this country is much lower, then it becomes a question of, okay, what they're really attempting to do is make sure that there is no funding whatsoever. So they don't want to fund women being able to travel from state to state to get an abortion. They don't want to, they want to make sure that if you're going to get an abortion, it is not a part of your insurance. It's not a part of your Medicaid insurance, but you have to pay for this separately. And so they're taking every effort to do that. They're even trying to create connections to TANF, which was for people coming out of poverty. And so there's all these things that they want to do to really undermine healthcare in a way. And we know historically, healthcare has always been an issue for the African American community. We know that we have some trust issues. We know that they've used enslaved Africans for experimentation. So there's been a history of that. But, over time, we felt like there was some progression in that. But now what Project 2025 wants to do is dismantle all of those things and put power in the hands of doctors, where patients will now have to have subscriptions to their doctors. Not HMOs, but you will have to have, your relationship would be through a subscription. They want to put hands in private institutions. So they're trying to, as Dr. Griffen said, they want to eliminate kind of this public health system of hospitals, but make everything privatized. They're putting power in the hands of free market insurance companies. So they want to do away with that system. And it's all an attempt to preserve white population as well as to continue this kind of wealth, building wealth. Because who owns the most insurance companies? Who owns doctor-owned hospitals? You know, those kind of things. And so it's a lot. You know, it was many pages, but there's so much stuff in that. And so I don't want to take up any more time because I know there are other folks on that have things to say, but I appreciate the time that you have given me.
I have a question, and we can just kind of go back and forth while you're here, and Doctor. So if a woman was listening to you just now, or if a Black person was listening to you right now, to what both of you have said already, they would say, well, what does that have to do with me? One thing that I learned when I was working with another organization is that when you talk to people about stuff that you're voting on, they're not going to pay you any attention unless you can tell them how it affects them personally. What would be your answer? First, you, Dr. Gibbs, and then you, Dr. Wendell.
I mean, you're directly impacted because it now changes, in particular for Black women, with the right of choice to choose how you're going to care for your body. You will now be, if you get an abortion, it's going to be, first of all, they want to make it illegal. Two, if you do get one, it's going to be mandated, means it'll be reported. Three, if you do get one, then that might actually directly impact Medicaid and Medicare insurance for you. Four, you're going to have to pay out of pocket. This will not be covered by insurance. If you're a man, what they want to do is center the family, mother, father, child. So as single parents, you will be penalized financially as well as medically if you are not in a quote unquote traditional nuclear family. And I also want to make the point that because Black people tend to be people of faith, they're using a narrative, a biblical and theological narrative that sounds good. But when you do the research, it only justifies their own self-preservation. So it directly impacts what comes out of your pocket and the care that you will receive.
So if you, Reverend Wendell, you can answer this. If you don't, under Project 2025, let's say you're not working, you can't work for some reason, or you just can't work, will you be able to get health care under Project 2025, or will you be penalized and not be able to?
You'll be penalized because, as Dr. Brian Ellis-Gibbs said, it's privatized. It's not public health, it's about private wealth. This is not a health plan, this is a wealth plan. If you are Black and you are unable to work, and let's understand something, most of our health care in this country, unlike other places in the world, is employer directed and provided. So if you're unable to work, you don't have health insurance, then you basically have to buy in the market your health care. You have to buy medical services, and you have to buy it at market rates because it is taking away all funding, public funding for instance, Medicaid that underwrites care, and it's also knocking out the basic Medicare because they're trying to go to this Medicare Advantage, which is basically a commercialized version of Medicare that basically is Medicare premium. You pay a premium for it. Now, the problem with that is if you've been out of work and you can't buy it, where do you get the care? If the doctors refuse to provide the care, where is your health? So let's go to women's health because this is, choice and care and provision. If you're a single woman, for instance, if you are divorced, widowed, unmarried, and you have a pregnancy, okay? And you have an ectopic pregnancy. Women who know about an ectopic pregnancy, there is only one medical care that you can get to save your life. It is called an abortion. It's not a prayer meeting. It's not a Bible study. It's an abortion. Abortion is a medical procedure. And the only way the woman can live is she get an abortion. But Project 2025 basically says nationwide, there will be no abortions. As a matter of fact, to make sure there's no abortions, it requires every medical facility to document every miscarriage, every abortion, and it penalizes those medical facilities that don't do so. Now, if you got to get an abortion, how do you get one if the doctors don't provide it? If you got to get an abortion and it isn't paid for under your health insurance, how do you get it? If you've been out of work, how do you afford it? And if it's not allowed in the country, where do you go to get it?
And that's what people are not thinking about. I mean,
And this is, if you are a woman, this is not a hypothetical situation. I am from Arkansas. Black maternal health in Arkansas is some of the worst in the country. Black infant mortality is some of the highest in the country. And I'm going to have to say it. We are a so-called red state. And so we have people who are voting against their own interests. And most of the folks who are needing this care are not Black folks now, okay? So
right.
white folks, poor white folks need this care, but they have they're drinking the Kool-Aid.
Right.
We Black folks, people of color, cannot afford to drink this Kool-Aid because it is not a Kool-Aid. This is Killer-Aid.
Yes, yeah, it's poison. It absolutely is. It's political poison. Let me go back for a second to something that Reverend Gibbs said. You said this is not a theological argument. It's not what narrative? You said it's not a theological narrative. It's something else. What? How would you define it?
No, they use, so I'll give you the example of the family, which they are really, you see that throughout also. That's kind of education around family is a father, a mother, and a child.
And that's it.
And
That's all.
so it is. And so they are saying that this is what God has done. This is the moral and ethical means of what a family looks like. Not taking into consideration that Jesus was born of a woman who had not yet gotten married. She was engaged, but she was not yet married. But they are slightly weaving in this kind of evangelical, well, I would say white evangelical interpretation of biblical texts from and misrepresenting what actually is to justify this Project 2025. And they do that throughout. And you see, and we haven't even talked about gender identification.
Right.
Yeah. Because they want to do away with gender identification altogether. They want to do away with research around gender identity. They want to do away with research around sex surgeries. They want to do away with anything of that nature. What they want to create is a nation where it is mother, father, child. If that does not fit the bill, then you will be, as Reverend Griffen said, as Dr. Griffen said, you will be penalized.
So in black and white terms, if you're a single mom and you are lucky enough to be able to have the baby, you don't have any complications, and you have the baby, theoretically your baby would not be eligible for health care because for any number of reasons. Maybe because you're not working, maybe because what?
It was interesting as I read that what they want to do is they want to hold the fathers responsible somehow. It's really kind of convoluted in certain areas. So they want to use the father's income to somehow give the child more child support. which means that they want to make sure that the father is working. Now, if the father is unable to work and cannot do that, then that becomes an issue because they are really want to demand that fathers are working and fathers are being present, which isn't so negative. But see, the whole other thing is we're dealing with a system that created poverty and sustains it.
Yes.
And we don't talk about that. All of these things are as if there is no system of poverty. And there is.
Yes.
And there is nothing there that is really dismantling a system of poverty, because if you still have poverty, then people are already in position to fail all of the measurements that Project 2025 would be put in place.
Absolutely. And that's so important. And I want for the people who are listening to understand that what they are defining as family is a man, a woman, and children. Not two women, not two men, but a man and a woman and child. They call those other things, they call it pornography. And that's a whole different conversation, but it's in there as pornography. So please understand that. Judge Griffen, I have a question. Several Republican states, including Idaho, Missouri, South Dakota, maybe Arkansas, I'm not sure, are already making plans to restructure Medicaid. Is that happening in Arkansas?
Yes, they're trying to restructure Medicaid. They are trying to add more requirements to Medicaid. Reverend Gibbs mentioned that they're putting a work requirement in order for you to get Medicaid. These are not, and this is unbiblical. Let me just put it blunt. This is not biblical, whether they're talking about families, because please remember, if you read the first chapter of Matthew, you read the genealogy of Jesus, David's great-grandmother was Rahab. She is not identified anywhere in scripture as having been anybody's wife. According to scripture text, she is identified as a sex worker, whether for ritual purposes or for commercial purposes. That's another issue, but she's not identified as a wife. And so that's not, that's a biblical family. Rahab had a biblical family. Hello? But this Project 25 would deny Rahab any maternal benefits. She would deny Rahab's children benefits. It would deny benefits to unemployed people. When Joseph went to Egypt, he didn't have a job. He was unemployed and was running for his life. And so it would deny Joseph, Mary, and Jesus any benefits. And the last thing I'll say is, because I'm sounding like a preacher, I take offense. I take offense as a follower of Jesus and a preacher of the gospel of Jesus when people use scripture to justify Project 25. When Jesus healed everybody of everything without asking whether they were employed, what kind of family they came from, and without asking what kind of conditions they had to bring about this. This is hellish. This is not holy, and it is diabolical. It is not healthy. It is hateful.
But it's being presented as a Christian moral, which is so maddening. It's just, that's why we say Christian nationalism is different than Christianity. And some people, in our webinars even have kind of pushed back, but it really is something for people to think about: Christianity versus Christian nationalism. We have a question in the Q&A, and either of you can answer this. Sister Pauline Lloyd says, other than voting, what can we do? Is there a way to have one of the panelists come to the local communities to present? So probably yes on the second part, we can talk about that. But on the first part, other than voting, what can we do?
Dr. Brian, I'm gonna let you go first because you have more urgency situations. I can stay here and talk as much as you want to, but if a doctor comes up and talk to you,
I I think one thing that we need to do beyond the voting is we need to develop relationships with the people that we vote in.
Yeah.
We need to have relationships with our elected officials on the local level. If you're in a county, a township, state, federal level, and we need to have ongoing meetings with them. If it's through your organization, if it's through a church, however, but they need to know your face and they need to know your name. In New York City, I'm in Queens, New York, and it is important that my city council person knows who I am. It is important that my state assembly and state senator know who I am. I have their phone numbers in my phone. And I think what that does is it positions us that then when we have those relationships, when we are advocating, then it positions us to have, through those relationships, to have a louder voice and a stronger voice because they know the relationships and they know the work that we do. And it impacts legislation. Because one thing that Project 2025, and I'll say this, Project 2025 wants to put a lot of power back into states. So if by chance that were to happen, we need to be in a position where we know folks and we can call up our senator and say, this is such and such, this is what needs to happen. So I think developing a relationship with the elected officials is so key.
Okay.
Amen. Amen. If I would add also, we have to remember that if you want to run fast, you can run alone. If you want to run strong, you got to have a team. You got to have collaborations. And that means we have to collaborate with folks outside our church group, outside our faith group, because this issue, Project 25, cuts across sectarian lines, cuts across biblical lines, it cuts across theological lines. This is anti-human, anti-health. And so I cannot say, I'm just going to talk to folks who go to my church or sing like I do, or pray like I do, or look like I do. We have to have collaborations. And so we have to collaborate with the LGBTQ community because these Project 25 issues on health and human services are not only attacking women, attacking women of color, they're attacking LGBTQ people especially. This is anti-diversity, it's anti-LGBTQ. And if we are not careful, we'll find out that we will have said, okay, because I didn't talk to these people, I didn't have the power to get the people who are making votes, understanding that this is not just the Black folks, it's a lot of folks. Dr. King understood this because that was what he was working on when he was killed. A cross-racial, cross-cultural kind of team. We have to do that. Lastly, I'll say we have to understand that the people that make these decisions also are deciding it against doctors. There are some doctors who really are up in arms about some of this. I've got physicians in our congregation. I got a white physician in our congregation who is outraged about Project 2025.
Yeah, but they can be outraged, but they're scared too, right? Outraged and scared. So many of them will be afraid and they won't be able to practice like they want to practice medicine. Is that a fair statement?
Exactly. He says, listen, I didn't go to medical school to turn away people who need help. I did not go to medical school to be told, to be threatened with criminal sanctions for providing care for people that I know need help. And I don't like this. I need to fight this.
And I think a lot of people feel that way, but they don't want to go to jail too. So it feels like we're in a place where, people are afraid. I'm going to ask another question about that in a minute, but I also want to say something. I want you to answer if you can. Statistically, how many people could lose their health care if Project 2025 was implemented? Statistically, just a rough percentage. How many people could lose health care?
I know I sound like a lawyer when I say it depends, But the truth of the matter is, it depends on the insurance market.
Mm.
Because the reality is Project 2025 says, listen, whatever, and Dr. Bryan said it very well, whatever the market decides it wants to allow, wherever the market is how insurance coverage will work. And it's going to be on a state by state basis. Hey, HHS is not going to be able to send out regulations that say this is the way it needs to be across the nation. This is what the Hobby Lobby case was about, that the Green family pushed against to knock out part of women's care for Obamacare. And so statistics, I'm not trying to avoid your question.
But it makes sense. It depends on the market.
Yeah, it depends on the market. So for instance, in states like Arkansas, Mississippi, Missouri, Idaho, look at a lot of the red states that refuse to extend their Medicaid coverage for Obamacare. When COVID happened, look at the death statistics. Look at the infant mortality statistics. Look at the hospital outcomes. These are wherever you make it wealth-based and market-based, you get worse health.
And that's what I get the feeling, y'all correct me. My feeling as I read through Project 2025 is that they just want to make this whole government a wealth-based, a wealth-driven operation, not a people-driven, but wealth-driven. So you could have people operating hospitals who don't know the right kind of sutures to use for what kind of surgery, or who can decide that that suture that you say you need, you don't really need it, so we'll give you a different kind. So they would be decreasing the quality of healthcare while also decreasing the number of people who are able to get healthcare, which probably then would drive the prices up, right? Because if you have fewer people who are getting healthcare, then the prices are going to go up. So many people are going to be priced out of healthcare. Am I in the ballpark?
You're right. You're right.
Yep.
Contrast this with France. I'm not French, but if you are born in France, you have health coverage. You have
Same way in Canada. The same way in Canada. I just read where somebody had open heart surgery and all they had to pay for was a prescription afterwards. Yeah.
You have health coverage from the moment you begin to breathe life until the last breath you have.
Did either one of you in your research for in preparation for this come across any statistics of what is expected to happen to older people, older Americans who cannot have health care? I'm supposing they would really be priced out of health care.
Yeah, you
Well,
recall.
I'll say that I didn't see any statistics in terms of how it impacts the senior population, although we do know that right now baby boomers are retiring and they are going to be the ones who are in jeopardy of not receiving Social Security and a host of other things. So, and they are a large population. I don't know the actual percentage, but if you're considering Project 2025 and how it impacts them, you're talking about maybe 15% of the population, baby boomers. I don't know, maybe that's a bit high, but talking about a large amount of folks, no matter what color you are, no matter what complexion you are, and they will be directly impacted. In particular, because of Medicare and Medicaid, because of the changes there.
Right. I agree. And
so if you're older, I'm sorry, go ahead, Judge. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Doc.
I was just gonna say, if you're older, if you're approaching the age where you would get Medicare, if Project 2025 comes into being, are you in danger of not being able to get it?
You are in danger of not being able to get it, and you're in danger of it not being able to cover as much. I mean, the question is, will you get it, and what coverage, what will it cover? Because remember, the doctors and the insurance companies will decide whether to cover, how much to cover, and what it costs to cover it.
See what that,
And Rev,
I don't know how, go ahead, Reverend Green.
just real quick, and Rev, we have not even talked about drug cost,
Right.
prescription cost.
Go right into that. Go ahead,
Because
talk
they
about that.
want to deregulate federal government from establishing a reasonable cost of drugs, and they want to create what? Another marketplace, in particular with generic drugs.
Yes.
Which I thought was found very interesting. And those are generic drugs are usually supposed to be on the cheaper side, the more economical side. But if you're going to now create a market, free market, competitive space for generic drugs or companies producing generic drugs, then, and there's no regulation of cost by the federal government, states will do it or insurance companies will, however it does. And it's very, can I say this? And when you read it, Dr. Smith and Judge Griffen, I don't know if you all saw this, but when I read it, you can read the hypocrisy in it.
Yeah.
They would say one thing and then you read a few more lines. It's like, wait a minute, didn't you just say that you didn't want this to happen? You want free market enterprise. You want competitive pricing. You want people, insurance companies and all these, but at the same time, you want to deregulate certain things, but you want other things to be regulated. And it's kind of like, well, what exactly is going on here? So it's convoluted in so many aspects of it. And, on just a funny note, I just thought, maybe they were confused while they were writing it. And they really didn't know what they were talking about, because you say one thing, you say, we want to maintain the integrity and the freedom of people to choose the best health care they have, to choose the best doctors they can. But at the same time, you're creating a space where it will be unaffordable to do so.
Hypocrisy is the word. Hypocrisy is the word. And I don't think that we need to sugarcoat this. One other thing that we need to work on, people can do. Tell the doggone religious folks who are white and evangelical stay out of your face, and tell them to get thee behind me. Tell them where to go, and tell them they are hypocrites because they are not followers of Jesus. Write op-eds, go on TV shows, go on radio, and tell folks, listen, when they show up and say they want, the politicians show up and say they want to run for office, and they've been endorsed by these so-called religious right folks, and say, excuse me, you just now have talked your way out of votes. No more talking here. Deny them a forum, because these folks need to believe they have Black and brown folks co-signing on their mess.
Let's talk about how the requirement, what they want to do, this work requirement for Medicare, medical care. Research shows that mandating work requirements only fuels racial inequality. This whole thing is based around race, y'all. It's just really a racist document, in my own opinion. But fuels racial inequality given the discrimination against Black Americans that exist in the low-wage market. In the low-wage market, compared with white Americans, Black Americans are about half as likely to be called back for an entry-level job, meaning they'd be disproportionately burdened by work requirements. Plus, reforms to Medicaid and other social safety net programs have long been tied to stereotypes that portray Black Americans as lazy or scheming. How's that going to magnify under this Project 2025? How's that going to magnify?
We need to remember something, that when Black people were fully employed as enslaved people, we got no health care. It wasn't because we weren't lazy. It wasn't because we weren't working. We had no health care. As a matter of fact, the idea of this work requirement is basically saying, we are going to require you to accept whatever job we offer, paying you however little we choose. as a condition for you to get any health care we let you have.
So it's a continuation of the plantation economy.
This is a throwback to plantation. The hypocrisy that Reverend Ellis-Gibbs talked about, this is what it's about. I mean, we can't sugarcoat this. Somebody says it's weird. I mean, this is weird, but and on the other hand, it isn't weird because this is the same old playbook. This is the neo-plantation playbook. This is the Jim Crow.
So if somebody said, because you hear the word fascism going around and socialism and all these terms going around, and I know many people say that what is proposed under Project 2025 is fascism. Somebody please explain for our listeners what fascism is, because people are not understanding. I don't even know that we all really understand what democracy is supposed to be, but we don't understand the difference between socialism and fascism. Should we say that what is being proposed is fascist, or is it something else? Because I don't want to be confused.
It is fascist.
Please break it down so people can understand why.
Dr. Brown, you want to go first? You want me to go first?
Well, socialism at its core, it's not what it has become, but at its core was really about equitable distribution of resources. Now it has become something other than that, of course, but at its core, fascism is more about, I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Judge, it's really more about loyalty and honor to a system. So when I have extreme beliefs about something, when I am devoted to a dictator, whether he or she is just or unjust, then that's fascism. When I am buying into something that is racist and unethical and immoral, but because the leader says it's right, that's fascism. That's different than socialism. And let me say that some of my research, the whole universal healthcare or healthcare for the entire nation is not something new. Truman tried to put it in place and got beat down for it. It didn't happen. Johnson did something, but even with that, in the 80s, as I read, they had to establish an Office of Minority Health because the Health of Human Services still wasn't doing right. And Project 2025, they have identified one of the resources that's supposed to continue to hold health and human service agencies accountable, and that is the Office of Civil Rights. And the Office of Civil Rights is supposed to be that kind of watchdog to make sure that people are receiving what they need. All people are receiving what they need. But Project 2025 has turned that narrative around and said, no, what they ought to be arguing for is the civil rights of the moral and ethical structure of family.
Which they define.
They define. Yeah. And they even want to redefine what sex means. You know, how you list, it says race, one cannot be discriminated based upon race, color, complexion, faith, sex. Well, now they want to define sex. What is that? What it actually is that? And if it does not line up with male, female, boom, that's it. Anything other than that, anything outside of that is not recognizable.
So that's fascism. That's fascism for those of you who are listening.
We're talking about Hitler, Nazism.
Right.
Yeah, the fascism is a political ideology that is based upon authoritarian rule by this authoritarian person or elite that prescribes a way of life and defines the ways in which power is going to be used and government will operate. So instead of government of the people, by the people, for the people, it is government of the few or the one. In this situation under Project 2025, it's the unitary executive, government by the one, for the few, for the benefit of the few, with the many being basically the people who are targets. Everything that Project 2025 does basically violates all of the progress in political development since the Magna Carta.
Wow.
Since the Magna Carta. And you recall the Magna Carta was about getting off this idea of rulers, lords, kings, divine rulers. Because now under Project 25, they're going to be serfs and lords.
Mm-hmm.
And quite frankly, what happens is the insurance companies and the banks and the rich will be the lords.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else are the serfs, and they're under the authority of a king, the unitary executive.
Yeah,
It is a
hope
mess.
I hope people are listening, because I think a lot of people, especially when I talk with Black people, they say, "Oh, you being special, you being extra." I say, "I'm not trying to be extra. I'm just trying to tell you that there's a lot at stake, and that if you value the health care that you got, some people didn't have health care before the Affordable Care Act was passed, and they got health care. You know, if you can pay for your medicine, right? Even now, it's still difficult to do that. But if you can pay for your medicine now, understand that if this thing goes through, you might not be able to do that." And people are not believing it. They are not believing. These people are serious. Now, the former president has said, "I don't know anything about Project 2025. He's not telling the truth. Big surprise, but he's listed almost 314 times in this document. Many of the people who worked most closely with him are authors of this document. They're working in cahoots. So in an effort to distance himself from Project 2025, because it's become a political liability at this point, he is backed away from it, says, "I don't know anything about it." But he does have Agenda 47, which is his. Agenda 47, look it up, y'all, look it up, because it's just rough, and it is without compassion. It is without sensitivity. They don't care about the people. This is all about money. It's all about money and power. Colleen Burchett asks, what are some ways that Black churches can resist and or become activists without losing their tax-exempt status? I'm going to say on the other side of this, if Project 2025 gets in, forget it. There's nothing you can do, because they're going to knock you down. But go ahead. Reverend Gibbs, go ahead.
I mean, there's some things that you can do without losing your 501c3 status. 501c3 status is really talking about how you advocate and ask. You cannot endorse any candidates. If you invite somebody in, you've got to make sure that invitation is open for everyone, which actually sets the church up to be really great space for panel speakers. It's a great space for you to invite electeds in, to have those tough conversations, to ask those questions to them, to hold them accountable. You can do voter education and voter engagement. But again, it's around endorsement, and it's also around, we cannot, as a church body, ask for specific legislation kind of things, but we can support advocacy in meeting with our elected officials. I am a part of an organization called Faith in New York, which is a part of a larger organization called Faith in Action. It used to be called PICO. And so we are faith-based, but we are active in the political process around that. And so, yeah, there are ways you can do that. And then you also need to research, are there any issues in your particular state and area? Because sometimes they'll catch you with that. You've got to know the state laws around what churches can and cannot do as well.
Great answer. I don't have a thing I can add to it. Great answer. Thank you.
Okay. one of the other things that's a big part, and we've already kind of hit on it in part in terms of health and human services, is what happens to the LGBTQIA community. They get screwed big time. Anybody want to delve into that?
Bigotry is legalized. Bigotry is politicized. Bigotry is commercialized, because basically the money is going to flow toward those who are the discriminators in chief against people who are LGBTQI. If you are, and let me just say this, there are two men in our congregation who have been together longer than my wife and I have been married. We've been married 49 years. If they had, first of all, for most of their time together, they couldn't get married. There was a time, but there was a time when if one of them got sick, the other one could not be with them in the hospital, even if they're having surgery. Under Project 2025, gender identity, sexual orientation, gender identity is not recognized. This is basically said, this is illegitimate. We don't even recognize it.
They're saying it's illegal.
It is illegal. Only male, female, anatomic. And so these men, if they have health issues, they can be denied. Not because they don't have means. They can be discriminated against because of who they are and how they love. Now that's not just sick, that's sinful. That's hellish. That's not loving your neighbor.
No,
That's hating your neighbor.
You have a good question. It says, since Project 2025 is a product of the Heritage Foundation and technically not the product of any party. I don't know about that, but is there a problem with having a discussion about this in our churches for our communities? I don't think there's that at all.
No. First of all,
that's why we're having these conversations.
Exactly.
So that you stuff and that you can take it back to your congregation and say, sit down, we need to talk about this. And I think what happens, I believe that if a congregation hears some of this stuff from their pastor, they're more apt to believe it than if they hear it from anybody else. That's exactly why we're having these conversations. That's a real good question, Lisa. Do you guys want to say anything more about that?
I'm glad you said it comes from the pastor, and I'm gonna just say it. Pastors, male or female, whoever we are, we have to go on the offensive on this.
Absolutely.
We have to initiate these conversations. Absolutely. We cannot wait for people to say, Reverend, we have to initiate the conversation, because sometimes we know our people are phobic about, number one, bringing up touchy stuff. And we're phobic about reading. We're phobic about reading Sunday school lessons. We're not going to read 900-page stuff. Certainly
not. And the other thing is that we are bound by, in our churches, I think all churches, white churches, black churches, we are bound by bad theology. You know, so we have to, be able to push, the pastor can push through that with his or her congregation a little bit easier than somebody else, but you absolutely have to have these conversations and talk about, because they're going to talk about Jesus, and that's good, but just talk about it and let people know that there's no danger to your salvation. And I say that like that because some pastors will say that if, and have said historically, that if you are for civil rights and you're endangering your salvation, you got to debunk all of that. And you've got to say, as Christians, as children of God, we have an obligation to know what's being done that will work against the precepts of Jesus, that will keep us from being compassionate and keep us from loving our neighbors as ourselves, that will set us against each other. That is our obligation. So these are, have these discussions in your church. And I think there's another woman who said, can somebody come to her church? And I'm going to have the panelists put their email addresses in the chat. So if you want to get in touch with them, or you can get in touch with me at the Proctor Foundation, we will do that. That's why we're doing these conversations, because people need to know. And we don't want you to be afraid of it. We don't want you to avoid it. We don't want you to act like it's not real, because it is. And the other side, whatever the other side is, kind of counts on the people being ignorant. So the way we fight, Colleen, the way we fight is that we know what's going on, that we are
Right.
not, we have the knowledge, and we can fight back with intelligence and with knowledge. So, go ahead. I'm sorry, Dr. Gibbs, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go back. First of all, I want to thank you all for creating space for me to be a part of this conversation and this discussion. I am grateful for that too. I'm going back to make sure my daughter's all right, because Black women are stigmatized in hospitals, and they
Yes.
think that when a Black woman comes in pain, that she can handle it, and we gotta deal with that. I am more than open to having more conversations. I talk to my people from the pulpit about Project 2025, and not going to be afraid to talk about it, even when a person came to me afterwards who was not a member of my congregation from England and said, I am doing something wrong. And so I will continue. If that's what wrong looks like, if right is wrong and wrong is right, then I guess I'm gonna be wrong in this instance. But again, this is so critical, so important. So many aspects of our community are being impacted. And again, we've got to be on the wall and make sure that we don't come down until this work is done. But again, thank you so much. I really appreciate all of you. But I got to get back to my baby.
Thank you for taking the time out of, it's a hard time for you, but thank you. I really appreciate you tuning in, and we'll be in touch.
Bless
Thank you so much. God bless you all.
God bless.
Dr. Smith, James White writes, there are many Black pastors who are homophobic and won't support LGBTQIA. How do we address this? I'm going to say something that's going to really get on some nerves. Vote with your feet.
Mm.
Vote with your feet. Don't sit up under a pastor who is refusing. Vote with your feet. Where your feet go, your tithes go. If you pay people who are homophobic, they are going to keep being homophobic until they realize that you no longer will pay them to be hateful. And when you say, no, you can be hateful, but you're not going to be hateful on my dime, on my dollar, on my tithes, then they can denounce you all you want to, but quite frankly, there are other congregations you can go to. You are not a slave to that congregation or to that preacher, whoever he or she is. And so vote, you're free.
That's really good advice, Reverend Wendell. That's very good advice. Vote with your feet, because here's the thing. It's just like you come to the realization. I came to the realization some time ago with some people who are, entrenched in whatever they believe. You're not going to change your minds, right? You're not going to, so you don't waste your breath on that. You don't waste and you work on and invest your energy with people who are willing to listen, who might consider another point of view, who might be able to say, well, maybe I need to rethink it. That's where you that's the prayer right there. That's where you walk into, and you're praying with your feet and walking with your feet. You go to those people. The ones who are stuck, you have to leave them stuck, because we don't have time. You understand, with this thing that it's creeping up behind us, we do not have time to sit in a space where we're trying to make somebody believe something that they're never gonna believe. And you have to say, cool, I'm cool. And you keep right on going. That's kind of like knocking your feet off, the dust off of your feet, like the gospel says, right? You just knock the gospel off, the dust off.
Right. Gospel is knocking dust off your feet. It's another. I've got another one. Do not cast your pearl before swine.
I'm saying.
Do not give what's holy to dogs. I have loved ones who are, God bless them, in congregations. They think I'm a heathen. They have the right to be wrong. I was a leader in the largest Baptist body in I was parliamentarian in the National Baptist Convention USA. And it's the largest body of Black Baptists. But quite frankly, I do not attend NBC USA gatherings, and I don't have any fellowships with them, not because I'm hateful. I love my brothers, and they're all pastors, Black male pastors, because they don't want to have women pastors. Don't even talk about LGBTQIA. But quite frankly, I don't have enough time left in my life to argue folks about that. I love them, but I have to move on. Jesus
Absolutely.
did the same thing. Jesus didn't spend time arguing with Christ. The Pharisees came and argued with him, but he didn't go down and sit down and argue with them. He was busy with the multitude.
Yeah, yeah. So let me just also put out for you guys, and I think we put it in the chat that you could look up for Agenda 47, which is the former president's personal thing, since he wants to distance himself from Project 2025. But in his Agenda 47, I'll read you a couple of things that he's proposing. He is himself. He proposes for K-12 schools to include having, I just lost my page, wait a minute, include having electing their school principals, cutting federal funding to any school teaching critical race theory, which you don't get in elementary school, ending teacher tenure, creating a new credentialing body to only certify teachers who embrace patriotic values, and you can guess who defines what patriotic means, encouraging prayer in schools, making it easier to kick out of control troublemakers out of school, supporting school districts that allow teachers to carry concealed firearms, and pushing school choice policies. That's for education. For universities, Agenda 47 says it wants to get rid of existing accreditors for colleges and universities and creating new ones who impose his party's values on institutions, along with levying significant fines on colleges and universities that he believes discriminate against students, with a plan to use those fines to create free online American academies that cover the full spectrum of human knowledge and skills. And I just do one more. For the Justice Department, Agenda 47 pledges to appoint 100 U.S. attorneys who would be aligned with the president's policies and investigate some left-leaning local district attorneys, also pledging to establish a DOJ, Department of Justice, task force on protecting the right to self-defense and fight purported anti-conservative bias at law schools and law firms. That's just some of what Agenda 27 is proposing. It is scary, scary stuff. Somebody asked, will a transcript of these truths be made available to access? We will have a transcript, I think, Julie, correct me if I'm wrong. I know we will have the video, which will be accessible to you. We also have a toolkit that's coming out this week that you'll be able to get some information from. But any other information that we have that's not in this tape, you can ask us for it, and we'll send you the information that we have. So we want you to have as much information as possible, because otherwise we get bogged down. We get bogged down. But please, and I'm kind of winding this up. I'm going to ask Judge Griffen to give me a closing statement in a minute. I'm kind of winding this down because we're close to time. But what I really want us to do, I just want you to walk away from here wondering, if I didn't have my health care, what would I do? If my mama didn't have her health care, if my mama couldn't get her health care, what would I do? How would I feel if my daughter or my granddaughter was having a baby and couldn't get an abortion that she needed to save her life, and she was left to die? I need for you to ask yourself those hard questions. What would I do if my mama, who's like 80 years old and she's had a stroke and she needs, some care, she can't get any care because now, because she's had the stroke, they'll call it a pre-existing condition and she can't get care. I want us to think about all of that. Think about it and get as much knowledge about that as we can, so that we'll be informed and we can have conversations with other people about it, because people don't know and they think we're being hyperbolic, and we are not. It's what's going on now, magnified 1,000 times. So I'm saying, if there's injustice in the healthcare system now, magnified 1,000 times. Judge Griffen, give me a closing statement.
I hope, and first of all, thank you very much, Dr. Smith, for moderating these critical conversations. And thank you, Proctor team, for making this forum available for all of us. I want to do three things. First of all, that's the preacher of three things. First of all, let me ask people to support Proctor Conference, because this is the conference that's making this available. Tell people about this, but also get involved with Proctor. Secondly, let me remind you that in July of this year, the Supreme Court of the United States, in its last decision, said that the President of the United States has absolute immunity from criminal prosecution. So, denying people who need help and health care can, under this Supreme Court's analysis, if the President of the United States mandates it pursuant to Project 25, although it would be criminal, he would be immune. He would be immune from prosecution. You couldn't charge him with the crime. You couldn't contest it in the court. You couldn't sue for damages for it. You couldn't sue for damages for being denied, because they could deny you the coverage because the president mandated denial of coverage. And they said, listen, if the president's immune, then the president's immunity extends toward us. This literally is a return to slavery, people. Please do not think this is a joke. This is a return to slavery. You get the benefits you can buy, and what you don't buy, we tell you you can do without, because we said so. This is a return to slavery. We are free people. We are free inherently, and the love of God has made us free. And as people who are free, the grace of God ought to liberate us to say, in the name of freedom and justice, we refuse to do this. No.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Judge Griffen. For y'all who came in late, Judge Griffen has been having his own family things as well. So I am appreciative of you, because actually all three panelists had some issues. So I didn't know how we were going to do this tonight, but God is good. So thank you very much. And Brian, absence, thank you so much. I put my email address in the chat, so if you have questions that were not answered or you want information that we did not provide, you can email us and we will get information to you. These webinars are always on our YouTube page, so you know what you've missed, you can go back and get, and this one will be on our page, I think, by tomorrow. And like I said, we will have a toolkit. We will have people that are able to come out to your congregations if you need to help engage and moderate in these conversations. But whatever you do, just please talk about it. And also, be sure that when you vote, it's not just for the president, but it's all the way down the ballot, and pay attention to the judges, because if you not noticed, it's the judges in the courts that are probably going to make the biggest impact on our lives. Meaning, if they pass a law that's just for the people and they take it to a court where the judges are not on our side, it can be knocked down. We can still suffer. Please, please, please talk to your congregations about the breadth of how much we have to vote and how important it is on all levels. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thank you for being with us. As we wind down, we always do ask, first of all, we say thank you for being here. Just thank you for being here. Gosh, I hope you got something tonight that you didn't know before. Thank you so much. And our next lesson, our next webinar is next Monday. Our last one, we're going to be talking about what happens if the Department of Justice is eliminated. And our guests will be Reverend Anthony Bennett and Reverend Dr. Earl Fisher. So we hope that you will come and tell your friends to come as well. All of this stuff impacts us as Black people. That's why I want to have these conversations, because I don't want us to think that everything's going to be all right, because if we do not vote, it will not be okay. And that is the plan on the other side. So anyway, But we ask you to invest in our work. We're appreciative of you being here tonight and all the other nights that you were here, and hopefully when you come back next week. And we need for you to invest. So we ask you to invest in us. You can do that by going to our website, sdpconference.info/legacy-fund, or the Givelify, and you see the website or Cash App. I'm not going to say all that because I get all my letters sometimes scribbled up, but you can read it and you can take a picture of that so you can figure out how we can you can give and invest in our work. And I always call it an investment. You're not just giving something, you're not donating, you are investing, because when you invest, you expect a dividend, you expect a return, and you should expect work back from us. If you invest in us, you should expect work back to you, and we're going to do that. The other thing that we want to encourage you to put on your calendar is our conference. We're going to be in Little Rock, Arkansas, where Judge Griffen lives. It's going to be on February 20th. I don't want to put the wrong dates, but it's going to be February 22nd through the 25th. I think they're going to put the slide up in a minute, so I make sure I'm not saying the wrong date. Am I doing it? I was wrong. February 16th through February 20th in Little Rock, Arkansas. Thank you so much, Julie. And you can register now. Registration is going on right now. If you register, the earlier you register, the better your prices. And we always promise to have really good educational sessions and things that will help edify you and us for this journey. So I'm going to now ask Reverend Damien, or if you are around, if you would like to come on and say anything, Reverend Damien Durr.
No, I don't have any. Uh-oh. Okay, no, I don't have anything to say. I think you all have covered all the bases again. Thank the Proctor team. Thank you, Reverend Sue, Reverend Marcus. Thank you, Judge Griffen, and thank Dr. Bryan for his willingness to even join while he was in the emergency room. So again, we thank all of you who have tuned in with us, and we look forward to seeing you again next Monday night. Thank you, Reverend Sue, for your leadership.
Absolutely. Thank you, all of you. Thank you. I got a text this morning, 2:30 in the morning, from the judge. I said, oh my goodness, oh, help me, Lord. So I'm so glad that you were able to come in. So thank you all for being here. Please spread the word. Please spread the word. And if you have learned anything tonight that you didn't know before, talk about it and tell people to go to project2025.org. There's a whole great big website. You can go into that website and you can see the whole document. You don't have to read all 900 pages. You can pick a chapter and pick what you want to read and what you want to accent. But please let people know that we are not being hyperbolic. This is very real, and there's a lot at stake for all of us. So with that being said, thank you, Dr. Griffen. See, I call you judge, I call you reverend, I call you doctor. So thank you, all of those titles. Thank you so much. And thank all of you, and we'll see you next week. Have a good evening. Take good care. Bye-bye.
Good night. Be well.